Hi, so I have another instruction video for you. This time it's a rural scene. It's some winter trees standing on a field. It is a scene which I have seen from many years ago in England, where I used to live, and it's haunted me since. So I had to paint it. And when I painted it, I found out that it was actually a very good exercise for people to try to learn winter trees. The thing with winter trees is that nobody bothers to paint winter trees because it's too difficult. Sometimes when I ask the people on my classes why they don't paint winter trees, well, it's because there's so many branches and you've got to show all these branches and it takes you lots and lots of time. Well, I'm going to show you how you can do it very quickly. So that's argument will not be used again. So sit back and have a look at this video of how to paint winter trees.
I start by drawing the horizon for my picture. The horizon is the line which divides the sky from the ground. And in this picture here, I think I shall have it about 1/3 of the way up from the bottom. It doesn't have to be drawn with a ruler. It's a natural line, so I'm just going to draw it like this. Okay, it was probably a good idea to get it as level as possible, but it doesn't have to be completely level. There are always little hills and things in nature. So, but I didn't want to have two lines there, so I've rubbed one of the lines out. Now I've got the ground here, and I've got the sky here, but over the sky, I mean, the thing which is here, the whole picture is the whole idea with the picture is to draw some trees here. And I shall have some trees standing on top of this line here. And I just draw the trees at the start of this session, this picture, with single lines. I don't try and show how wide the tree trunks are, and of course I have to show how high the tree is and how long the branches will be and things like that. So I start with one line about the middle of my paper here, and I draw a line here. And I've now decided that my tree is going to be this high. My tree is going to be quite a large tree. If one wants to get an idea of what sort of trees I'm going to be drawing, then perhaps this tree here is a good example. You can see it's got quite a straight, thick trunk here, and then it starts breaking up into smaller branches and smaller branches again, and then right at the end there are some twigs, and these twigs interlace. They overlap each other, and they give this effect as if there was some fog at the top of the tree. Everything goes a little bit out of focus here. When you look at such a tree right at the top, there are so many small twigs and branches crossing each other that the whole thing looks quite foggy. And this is the whole idea with this picture, to show, well, it's perhaps not, that's not the whole idea with the picture, but we're going to be using this effect in this picture. So I've got my tree trunk here, and if you also look at this picture here, you will see that all the small twigs, they make they come to the same height. I mean, there isn't anything which sticks out here and something a bit shorter here and something here. They all seem to end up at the same level here at the top of the tree. So when I draw my tree, another thing which I allow myself, that is to make a round line at the top here, which tells me that all the small twigs, they will end up at this line here. Okay? And I can start by doing a few of them so you can see how I do it. I start at the tree trunk, and I go all the way up to this curved line. This is the border of the tree. And I just draw. You see, I start with one line at the tree trunk, and then about halfway up, I get some of the others. And then again, halfway across that one, then I take another and another and another. And the whole idea is to get a lot of small branches and twigs, especially at the end of these larger branches. If some of them collide with the other lines that I've drawn, that's okay. But the idea is to get some lines to divide and divide again and again and again until I get a whole lot of lines at the top of my tree. I don't have to draw them all. See, when you look at such a tree, you probably think, well, there's millions of twigs and things like that. You don't have to draw millions of them. You just have to draw a few, or shall I say, you have to draw enough for them to work with the picture. When I've done this tree in the middle, I decide, well, I want to have at least three trees in this picture. So I'm going to plant another tree by the side of this one, perhaps here, and then again, it's got this round, this curved area at the top, and this area that I'm going to draw all my small branches and twigs up to. So slowly, I start at the top of the tree and I go down the tree and I make more and more of these twigs, small branches. At the moment, the tree has a very thin. It's only got one line for the tree trunk, but it's much easier to start with a single line for the tree trunk, and then when you start painting it, to decide how thick, how wide the tree trunk is. If you start doing it now, you haven't got so much information to tell you exactly how the tree will be in, what proportion the tree will be in, and it's much easier to decide how big, how wide, how fat the tree trunk is when you start painting it. A third tree here, again up to this area here. Now I start at the top, I start making these small branches, and on both sides of the tree trunk, just make sure you don't make it too irregular. So one here, one there, one here, one there. It's got to be a little bit more irregular. The more irregular you get it, the more natural it looks. So when you do each branch, don't look at the others. If one starts looking at the other ones, then perhaps one will get them a little bit too regular. But it's much easier to draw such a tree if you just concentrate on one branch at a time. Avoid getting your trees to look like this, so regular as this, they start looking more like feathers than trees. Try and get your trees to look more like this. So now I've got the three trees drawn. And the next thing to do will be to paint the sky over this. Now the sky, I'm going to paint with a couple of colors. I'm going to, the blue of the sky, I think I shall use Prussian blue. So I've got my water here and I've got my color here. Now I'm dissolving my color. I'm going to be painting my sky on wet paper. But one of the mistakes people new to watercolor do, they wet their paper and then they go and dissolve their colors. And when they come back to their paper, the paper is dry. So that is obviously not the way to do it. The way to do it is to dissolve the colors and have the colors ready, and then wet the paper, and immediately afterwards you paint the color onto the wetted paper. So that is my Prussian blue color here. I'm going to have another color as well. The other color which I'm going to paint onto my sky is going to be Alizarin Crimson. So that is my Alizarin Crimson here. I don't need very much of these two colors, or rather I don't need very much of the Alizarin Crimson. I'm just going to use a couple of stripes across the blue when I do that. So now I'm going to wet my paper. You must probably expect me to wet my paper with my brush. Well, like you can see, my paper is quite large. My brush, although it is a number 12, it's not all that big. It'll take me a long time to wet my paper with such a small brush, small compared to the amount of paper I'm going to wet. So what I choose to do, I choose to use a natural sponge. These small sponges, you can buy them in art shops, and they're made. They're not made, but they are used especially for painting, especially with watercolor. So I put it into the water and I press all the water out again, so I really get my sponge to be soft and wet. I think now it might be a good idea to fix the paper to the painting board. So I'll just take this masking tape and fix the watercolor paper to the board here. I do it at the top and the bottom. I'm going to try to paint this picture without going all the way to the side of the paper. So even though I'm going to be painting wet into wet, and the paper will be quite wet, I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. And oh, wait, you never know what might happen. I think I shall put the tape all the way around. That way, nothing can go wrong. So even though I'm putting the paper all the way to the edge of the painting paper here, it's not certain that I'm going to paint all the way out to the edge. This is just to keep the paper from buckling too much. Now I'll go back to my sponge here. I'm pressing all the water out, but the last time I don't press it all out. I press it about halfway out. So I've still got quite a lot of water in the sponge here, and I wet the paper with a sponge like this. Doesn't have to be a very big sponge. With a little sponge like this, you actually wet the paper very quickly. Now I'm just looking to see if there are any areas. I can see there's also some water running down. That means there's too much water on the paper. So I've now pressed all the water out of the sponge, and I'm just going to go once more up through the area here. And what I'm expecting is that the excess water goes into the sponge, and I can now say that I've got the perfect layer of water on the paper. Okay, the next thing to do is to get some paint on the brush. So the sky is going to be Prussian blue. And I just put it on. It's not going all the way out to the edges. Put it on as stripes, as you can see. I'm not trying to get it to run together. I'm not trying to get it to be a completely even blue color on the sky. And now, before anything starts drying, I'm going to put a little bit of red on. This is the Alizarin Crimson color. See, a few stripes is going to give me a feeling of either a winter sky or a late afternoon sky, something like that. So now I've got the two colors on. And this thing has to dry before I can continue with it. So I'm going to use a hairdryer now and just get this to dry much quicker than it would by itself. Now this area is dry, and the next thing to do will be to paint the trees. Now the color I shall be using for the trees is something which I use quite often when I need a brown color. See, if you look at my paint box here, in my palette I have a burnt sienna, but this brown is a little bit too red. It's not brown enough for a tree trunk. And I know from my experience and from this color chart which I made many years ago, and which is also on the YouTube, if I use burnt sienna and mix in ultramarine blue, then every time I use a little bit more ultramarine blue, then I get a darker brown. And the brown I really want to get is around here somewhere. So what I have to do is to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to my burnt sienna. I'll just get a little bit more of this so I don't run out of it for this particular tree. Other trees, well, I can mix a new version of this mixture. And then I add a little bit of ultramarine blue. Every time I add a little bit of ultramarine blue to this color here, it gets darker. So I want to stop around here somewhere. So that will be the color which I'm going to be using for my tree trunk here. And I might as well start. I'm using my big brush at the start, and I'm going to start on the tree trunk in the middle here. And I'm going to try and paint it all the way up to the top. But you can see my brush is too wide. So I'm going to go over to my rigger brush. I think in America it's called a liner brush. This is a number 2 brush. it gives a very fine point. And with this brush, I'll be able to paint the rest of my tree. So you can see I can go up to the top. Even though I've drawn all these small branches and twigs, it is difficult to paint over them. So I'm actually painting some new twigs and new branches. Otherwise, it'll be almost impossible to try and paint the ones which I have drawn before. So you can see, I only drew them as an illustration for you what I'm going to do afterwards. But perhaps you need a few of them to start with, but you don't need them all, because now I'm actually drawing some extra ones which I had not drawn before. So, and I'm going from one side of the tree now. I'm just getting more and more paint on my brush here. And I try to stop at this curved line at the top here. The brush is jumping about by itself. You know, as I'm pushing it up the paper, the brush is jumping and giving me some extra lines, which are a little bit beyond my control, and that is just fine. You don't have to have control over everything that you do when you're painting. Sometimes it's a good idea that some lines just paint themselves. So I'm just painting a little bit more here. So up to the edge of this curved line. It is important that I get quite a lot of small twigs at the top. You will see why in a minute. Some people find it easier to paint with this brush when they move the brush towards themselves, but then the brush doesn't jump. So you miss out on all these extra lines which you will get if you're painting in this direction here. Here the brush jumps, it doesn't jump. If you're pulling it, it jumps when you're pushing it. So that could be one tree. Then I can go over to the next tree. I can mix some more color, or I can use the color which I've already got. I think I shall mix a little bit more, so make sure I don't run out. And then I'll do the same with the next tree. As I said before, this brush here is very good for very thin lines. And you will get very thin lines if you use it like this. If you use it almost perpendicular to the direction you're drawing the line. But if you want a thicker line, then what you do, you put it at 90 degrees to the direction, and then you press a little bit on the brush, and then you'll get a thicker line. But when I want the thin lines, when I go back to painting it in the direction, then I want the twigs and branches to go. I mean, this thing here, when you're painting these small branches and twigs, they don't have to be perfect. You will see why in a minute. But well, it's a good idea to get them almost the way you want them. See, by pressing a little bit on my brush, I can get a line a little bit thicker here, and then I hope it'll get thinner when I get up to the top of the line, top of the tree. So this could be tree number 2, and the same thing would happen with this tree. Now I'm pressing quite a lot on my brush and getting quite a thick tree trunk here. And now I go back to using the point of the brush and getting some very thinner lines. Again, it's difficult to paint precisely over the lines I drew with my pencil. So I'm actually not trying to paint over the lines. I take a little bit of idea from where I have drawn them. I'm actually painting more or less my own tree once more now. And painting my own branches and twigs. And looking to see how these trees look. Okay, now I have painted the 3 trees the first time, and they look like this. And this is fine. Now they've got to dry, because I'm going to do something which perhaps will shock you a little bit. And well, I'm going to make sure they are dry using my hairdryer again. And I'm pretty sure they are dry now. And now I'm going to do something which you will wonder a little bit about. But now I'm taking just water onto my brush. No color. Okay, there is a little bit of color in the water. I haven't changed the water. So it's still the same water that I was using to paint. But now I've only got water in my brush, and I go to my trees and I wash the edge of my tree together. So I'm dissolving the color at the edge of the tree, so the whole thing runs together here. But only at the edge, not in the middle, only at the edge there. And then I do the same for the next tree here. And the same for this tree here. Again, how precise have you got to be? The important thing is that you keep within this round edge of the trees that we drew at the start. The color can disappear into the tree, but it's not supposed to paint or rather dissolve the color of the whole of the crown of the tree. And once more, this has to dry. Okay, and now this is dry. And what do? I paint the tree once more with a darker color. Okay, so here I had my burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Now I'm just going to give a little bit more of the 2 colors, so I get a darker version of my brown color. And the reason for this is that in painting, a light color against a dark color gives depth. Now I've got the light color already on my paper, especially after I have tried to get the thing to run a little bit together here. So now what I do, I go back to my tree and I yeah, I can, for example, now I can see how big the tree is, and I can see that this tree trunk is not big enough. So I can quite easily paint it a little bit thicker and try and see if this thickness of tree trunk looks better on my tree. And when I get up to the top here, I start painting my small twigs and small branches once more. Again, this time I try not to hit the or paint over the twigs and branches which I painted before. So this dark color which I'm painting on now against the light color which I have from the previous procedure should give me depth in the tree. Okay, so I can and that is why it is important that you don't paint over the branches which you had painted before, because then they'll disappear. The idea is that you can see both the weakly painted branches and those that you paint now, which are much darker and stronger in color. So I'm just putting some extra and then I go back and make some of these extra tree trunks. Oh, no, sorry, not tree trunks, extra branches. I just have to get a little bit more color here. Okay, and then I go back here and try and get some more. Bigger branches and twigs at the end. I could perhaps get another one here, all the way from here. So some of these trees, they send out the big branches right at the bottom somewhere. And the other thing is, as you can see here, I have a very light branch here and a very dark one here. And the dark one seems to be coming in front of the light one. So you're creating depth all the time in that way there. Now I think I should go over to this one. And again, get some more color mixed up. I'll start with the tree trunk all the way up to the top. And then make some of these branches come from the tree trunk up to the top, and at the top they break up into smaller twigs which overlap and give me that foggy look at the top of the top of the tree here. Okay, now I've painted these two and they are still quite wet. So I think now I shall let them dry and then go back to this one here. And I go back to this tree here. First I make a broader tree trunk to it. And then I try and get all the branches to go out to the edge of this tree here. I don't know what sort of trees these are supposed to be. Perhaps they're supposed to be elm trees or sycamore trees or something like that. They are some quite large trees. I mean, it's not sort of small saplings that you've got growing somewhere. They're supposed to be quite large trees and quite old trees. I mean, the older the trees, these trees are. The larger they are, the taller they are, and the more branches they have. So this could be the 3 trees that I will have in my painting. Just think about getting a little bit more here. Something like that. So those are the 3 trees, and I think I'm going to stop with the trees now and show you how I paint the rest of the picture. While these trees are drying, I think I should tell you a little bit about my ebook for those that haven't heard it before. Yeah.
Hi, if you like the way that I teach and believe that you can get benefit from my lessons, then I suggest that you have a look at my ebook. The book is called Watercolor, a book of watercolor techniques, and is available on my website. The ebook contains 23 chapters and is written with people starting in watercolor in mind. There are sections on painting theory, tips and tricks, and step-by-step painting instructions. The book is now improved with extra illustrations and video clips. The ebook costs $15 and one pays by PayPal. I send you the book by email after I have confirmation of the payment. So go to my ebook webpage and see the contents of the chapters. And if you decide to buy it, then you can see how to order it on the same page.
The 3 trees are now dry, and this is, of course, a fantasy picture. I have seen something like this in nature when I lived in England with those big farms and big fields. One had small collection of trees in the middle of a great big field. And I remember not so long ago, I was teaching in Denmark for one of my classes, and we were doing this picture, and I mentioned this to the class. And I said, I don't know why farmers have left these trees in the middle of their field, but well, they're good to paint anyway. And a woman lifted her finger up and pointed to me and said, well, I know why they do it, because I'm a wife of a farmer. And the reason why farmers leave a number of trees in the middle of a great big field, it's like a refuge for the small animals, especially at harvest time and things like that. All the small mice and whatever else is living in between the corn and things like that. When the big machines come, well, they've got to run somewhere, and they usually run to these islands of trees in the middle of fields. So there is a good reason for having these collection of trees, some sanctuaries in the middle of the field. The next thing which I want to do here is to paint some bushes around the bottom of these trees. And I'm going to show you two techniques. They're going to be wet into wet techniques. But you'll see what I'm going to do here. Usually wet into wet is when you wet a piece of paper and you paint a color onto this wet piece of paper. The wet paper is one wet, and the wet paint that you paint on is the other wet. So painting a wet paint onto a wet piece of paper is wet into wet. You can also paint a wet paint into another wet paint. That is again wet into wet. And this is the wet into wet technique, which I'm going to show you here. Now I want to have some bushes. This is winter. You can see there aren't any leaves on the trees here. So it's winter. So the bushes are going to be brownish. Now I've got this brown color for my trees by mixing burnt sienna with ultramarine blue. But what now if I, instead of mixing the color on my palette as I did here and get a brown color here, I mix it on the paper. So if I now take, for example, the pure burnt sienna color and put it onto my paper here, you can see my brush it's quite wet. That is why the color is running a little bit in the areas where it's landed on the paper. The paper is dry. Now I take the other color, I take the ultramarine blue, and I put that onto the first color. So now these two colors are painted wet into wet. But that is not enough, because if you look at this now, I mean, these two colors are just sitting there because the area is wet, but the area around is dry. So now what I do, I take a little bit of water in my rigger brush, not too much. I dry it a little bit like this, and then I go and just touch the edge of this area. You can see what I'm doing. I'm almost placing the whole brush on the paper here and just wiggling the brush. Now, if I want a little bit more brown color in here, we'll also get a little bit of red of blue color here. Just to show you again, I've washed the brush, washed the color out of the brush. I just dry it like this, and now I go in and just, and that could be my bush. And here I have placed the burnt sienna color first on the paper, and then I've painted the blue color into it. But what happens if you do it the other way around, when you put the blue color on first? Now I know I'm not going to ruin my picture because I've done it before, but this is just to show you that you can put either one or the other color on the paper first. It will give you two different effects, two different colors out of it. But now I've washed the color out of the big brush, and I take the little brush here and just touch the edge here. So now I've got two, well, rather I have some bushes at the bottom of the trees, and the bushes are painted wet into wet on dry paper. The reason why I can get the edge here to go like this is because I'm also using paper which has got a structure in it. And by using paper with structure in it, then I can also get this edge here by using my brush in this way here. Now these trees here are standing on an island, and around these trees there will be fields and perhaps some background. Okay, it is winter. It's not very colorful. It's and I can, for example, mix a little bit of ultramarine blue color to my brown color, which I've just used on the paper here. And I can say this color I can use as a background. So I'm going to just paint it up to here and paint it up to here. Okay, so this could be, so these areas here could be other fields further back. Just by using all the paint up in in the brush, then I can get a lighter color there, which gives me more distance. So this is the back of the picture. We're not completely finished yet. We'll come back again to this area here. But now I want the foreground. And the foreground is painted in a rather interesting way. It should take me no more than 3 seconds to paint it, because you can see what I'm going to do here in a minute. I'm going to be using the same 2 colors again. I'm going to mix my burnt sienna. Now I'm going to paint something which perhaps will look like a plowed field. And a plowed field hasn't got too much color in it. But I'm going to use this ultramarine blue. And I've used the burnt sienna. I've got a lot of it inside my brush here. And the thing which I'm going to do, I hope I can do it in one go, is to make a zigzag across my paper. Okay, so I start here. There wasn't quite enough paint here, so I'm going to do it again. And you can see, because my paper is rough, or rather, it has a structure in it. Then when I drag my brush across it like this, then I get all these white areas. I get all these white areas, which could be either water or it could be snow. It's all up to myself, whichever thing I can see in it. I think I should get my line a little bit closer up to the trees, but I still want to keep this white line at the bottom of the trees. So this is a winter scene with some trees standing up against some plowed fields. And perhaps this is snow. It could also be water. If it's water, then I would give it a little blue color, as if the sky was reflecting in the water here. And then I would paint some reflections of the trees. Perhaps this is what I will do. But before I do all that, this has to be dry. Now this should be dry. And now I can take a little bit more. See, I'm just getting a little bit of water into my brush. If I want to paint anything on top of this brown area here, then it's got to be even darker. So here I can mix even more ultramarine blue to the color I ended up with here. And now I can, for example, start giving some darker edges to some of these areas here. And when I've done this, I wash the brush out, wash the color out of my brush, and I just wet these edges here, try and get them to run a little bit so they're not quite so sharp. And what would these edges be? Well, they could be edges to some puddles, or edges to something. I'll also go back to my small brush here and perhaps give a little bit of something which looks like stones. I'm using the ultramarine blue color now. Just a few stripes of this blue color here. Could be something on the edge here. Perhaps a line underneath there. Like that. One of the things which I can show here, with this picture is that if you have a dark area like this and you want to show a fence or other fence posts, well, if you show fence posts here, if you draw them dark on dark, you won't be able to see them too well. But actually what happens is, even if you have dark posts standing in this area here, they will look light. They will look as if they are light in color. So one of the things which you can do here is to wash some color out. Okay, so I'm washing some color out. Then I take a piece of paper here and I just dab it on. It's best to have a piece of dry paper when you're doing this. The darker the areas you have, the lighter will these posts be. Well, make sure you don't make these posts all standing up completely perpendicular as if they were new. These have to be old posts. So they're leaning to one and another side. There's equal spaces or unequal spaces between the posts. And everywhere where you have a dark background, you can have a light post. And it's very easy. All you do is wet the area with a small sharp brush. You take the paint off with a dry piece of paper. Where you have a light background, then the post will be dark. Okay, so in the areas, I mean, you don't want, I'm only doing this to show you how to do posts. I mean, perhaps there are already too many posts on my picture, but this is just to show you how to wash color out. If you didn't know before, I expect you did. If the tree trunk is a little bit, if the tree trunk sort of disappears a little bit in the background here, and you want to have it a little bit more visible, then you can always wash a little bit of color out there. You can also mix a little bit of your color together. And see, another way of doing this is to go in and just paint around the posts, making sure that you get the color to disappear afterwards. That wasn't a good idea, because then the tree trunk disappears on the other side. So we've got a couple of bushes there. Then you can go back to your trees if you think that your trees need a little bit more twigs or anything on them. Then you can always go back and paint them on. Now, I said before that if this was water here, then I would give it a little bit of blue color. And I'll show you what I mean here. See, now I've got a blue sky. Okay, it's got a few reddish stripes in it, but if I now say that the water, that this is water, and there is a little bit of blue color in it, then I can give it a little bit of blue, make sure it is dry, and try and show a reflection in it. Now the reflection will have almost the same color as the tree trunk. Okay, so I'm just mixing a little bit of dark brown color here with my ringer brush. And reflection. Okay, if the tree is standing in that direction here, then the reflection will be as a mirror image on the ground. I mean, a shadow will go in a completely different way because of the direction of the sun or of the light. But a reflection is gives a complete mirror image. So if this one is completely vertical, so the reflection will be vertical. If this one is going to the right, then the reflection will go to the right. We can assume that this line on the paper is the surface of the water. And above the water are three posts. One in the middle, which is completely vertical above the water. One to the left, which is leaning to the left. And one to the right, which is leaning to the right. Now these posts will throw a reflection into the water. And the post to the left, because it's leaning to the left, will throw a reflection which goes exactly into the water at the same angle as the post is standing above the water. The post in the middle, because it's vertical, will throw a vertical reflection into the water. But you can see that the reflection is drawn by short horizontal lines, because one assumes that the water is in motion, producing small ripples, and the reflection catches the top of these ripples, and when you look at it, it looks like it's made up of small horizontal lines. The reflection of the post to the right, which is leaning to the right, is also drawn by these horizontal lines. Now we can have a look to see what happens in real life. Here I have a stick which is standing vertically above the water, giving a vertical reflection in the water. When the stick moves to the left, then the reflection also moves to the left. And when the stick moves to the right, then you will see that the reflection also moves to the right. Now the water is very still, it gives a perfect mirror image. But if there is motion in the water, then you will see there will come ripples, and these ripples will give some horizontal lines. This one is going a little bit to the left, so I'm going to do. And the reflections are usually done with some squiggly lines like that. See, this one here is quite. Now I'm only showing the reflection of the tree trunk. If one wants to give reflections of the small branches, then I think it will be a little bit too much. So those are the reflections on the water. And well, the picture is almost finished. Now this picture here it's a picture in the autumn, or as you say in America, in the fall. There aren't any leaves on the trees here, but there may be a few left. And if you wanted to show them, then what I would do here, I would take the pure burnt sienna color, which suggests to me leaves in autumn, and I would just put some brownish color on top of this area here. I hope you can see that. If it was a tree in spring, then there would be a lot of very young green leaves at the top of such a tree here. So what would one do? Well, one would mix up a green color, perhaps using a cadmium yellow and a Prussian blue, and just very lightly paint a greenish area on top of the tree here,
as if they were the first green leaves of spring.
So you can actually paint trees in the spring, early spring. Perhaps there's still snow on the ground, things like that. But or very late autumn trees. Autumn trees will have reddish color in the top of the tree. A spring tree will have a greenish color. So now here we're mixing two seasons together, which is impossible apart from on a painting.
In winter, when the trees stand in snow, this scene could perhaps look like this.
So this was how to paint some winter trees. I'm calling them winter trees even now that we've decided they could be spring trees and autumn trees, but painting winter trees on a plowed field or something. You can see here, I have not corrected for any of these white areas here, because if I start correcting those, and I mean, how am I supposed to correct them? This looks very natural to me, as if there's a little bit of snow still left around the bottom of the trees here. So I'm not going to do anything else with this, and we'll see. And this is the way I want my picture to be. If you want to show some sort of line between some of these posts here, then I would take the rigger brush again, a little bit of dark color, and just make a quick line. Nothing with, see, if the line disappears, I wouldn't go back and try and get it to show itself again. The line that I've drawn here looks quite a natural line.
But I think I will give it just a little bit more dark color in the foreground here.
And again, with a little brush now, I'll drag some of these colors around here. Have I ruined my plowed field? Perhaps, but now I've got something else. Now perhaps it's not a plowed field. Now it's just perhaps a field. So you can change things that quickly and that easily. Anyway, have fun trying to paint something like this. It is a lot of fun, and it's a picture which is quite quick. You can see that most of the time was spent painting the trees. After I painted the trees here, the rest of the picture went very quickly. Okay, so that was that picture, and have fun painting. Try this this motive, this scene, and see how it goes. Okay, bye.
And here you have a gallery of some other pictures in the same series that I have painted, and pay special attention to the trees. There are some good ones here.